My guest today is a returning guest, Troy Paddock, who was previously last year's, but here to talk about what led up to World War One, and he agreed to come back to talk about the second Christmas special of this podcast, and we're going to talk about the Christmas truce, of course, in 1914, which is one of the most significant, I think, in war history, events in war history, and what makes this event so eventful, to put it that way, significant. Of course, the answer is obvious, but elaborate a little bit.
Oh, well, I think what's remarkable about the truce is just how potentially subversive it was. I mean, you had what was really a front line, both figuratively and literally, movement on the part of troops of both sides of the Western Front, thinking it wouldn't be a bad idea to take a break. And to me, I find this fascinating that they are able to do this. And this is, I think, only possible on the Western Front because you have this strip of land between the two sides that, is universally referred to as no man's land. And this was, literally neutral territory. Technically at one point it had belonged to France or Belgium, but for the period of the war, neither side possesses it. And so this is a space where the soldiers can talk to each other and not be combatants, and that both wanted to do so and were willing to do so. And what is maybe more important, were forced to stop by their superiors, is, I think, remarkable. And I think it shows you just how powerful this, movement that is, it's often treated as a nice little anecdote and side story, but I think it really was much more than that and much more dangerous.
I want to ask, has it been over exaggerated, or was it as we think it happened during that Christmas in 1914?
Why do I think it happened?
No, do you think they were over exaggerating a little bit, maybe how it happened, or do you think we are pretty accurate on the front?
I think there's a pretty general consensus about what happened. I mean, nobody is going to say this is how it happened, this is where it began. It appears, by most of the scholarship, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I've read every single thing that's been written about the Christmas truce, because I haven't. But what seems to be pretty clear is that there was a general interest on both sides to not fight on Christmas. And, depending on where you were, the version that I'm most familiar with is the one presented by Stanley Weintraub in his book about the Christmas truce. But you have, on one side, a German soldier, going out with a flag and his hands up, so showing that he's unarmed. And someone from the other side comes out and they talk. And the first arrangement made is actually to agree to let some British come out and bury some of the dead that were in no man's land, just give them a proper burial.
So that's what the original idea, that they were not that it was going to be a whole Christmas celebration.
No, there was no plan for a party.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and the original understanding was, we'll take some time and bury our dead, and that's happened in a number of places. To the best of my knowledge, this is never coordinated. There is never any kind of behind the front line coordination or approval of these endeavors. These are all single initiatives by various units, and they are able to do so. And what is striking to soldiers on both sides is you have instances where people from the other side, whether it's Germans helping the British or British helping the Germans, doing some digging and helping bury people that they may well have had a hand in killing, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, obviously there will be some language barriers as well. So how did they handle?
There's some, but a lot of Germans had some command of English, because you had Germans who had spent time studying in England. So, the people who knew both, and it tended to be more Germans than Brits, were sort of in high demand. But communication was possible, and obviously, they're not having big political or philosophical or cultural discussions. So,
Yeah, that would be a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. So they're able to figure things out, and it is amazing, that there appeared to be sort of a certain set of kind of unwritten ground rules. As both sides sort of milled in no man's land. The Germans didn't go too close to the British side. The British didn't go too close to the German side. There was an understanding this wasn't a chance for reconnaissance. This wasn't the opportunity to sort of build up your defenses. This was an opportunity to not shoot each other.
So you as you said, it started with letting buried the dead, and I assume the Germans did the same as well on their side. That they buried their dead.
Yes.
So when did this start? This kind of, like we said, talked about communicate and kind of, I assume, share a little bit of history here and a little bit of. I assume that's how it happened, right? That they shared a little bit out with each other, or am I wrong here?
No, there's pretty good evidence. Both the British government and the German government, were we're aware of the imposition of having troops fighting for Christmas. You might remember sort of, the spirit of 1914 was, this was going to be a really quick war. We'll be home, by Christmas. Well, Christmas was coming and they weren't going to be there. And there were some, the British sent some, was it 2.16 million Princess Mary boxes filled with goodies, tobacco, alcohol, and sweets were shipped to British and Imperial troops. And in fact, apparently, according to Weintraub, for 24 hours, military deliveries were suspended so that some 335,000 tins could be brought directly to the front.
Did the Germans have the same, that they were shipped? Didn't they care as much on the German side about this?
Yeah, no. There were Weihnachtspakete as well from Germany, and that but both sides cared about this, and so there were exchanges of treats as well, on both sides.
I want to ask, have you seen that commercial? I think it was that was made a few years ago regarding the Christmas truce. What did you think about that?
I think I saw it, but I don't have enough of a memory of it to even pretend I can speak authoritatively about
fair
it.
enough. I thought it was a lovely piece of commercial, to be honest, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing it, but I can't remember saying, wow, that's really good, or wow, that's really awful. So I don't remember. I'm sorry.
So what happens next when the shipping arrives and they get the shipment, and I want a little bit of continuation here. So
Sure. Well, one of the things that happens is on the German side, they start putting up little Christmas trees on parapet. So they see Christmas tree. The British can see Christmas trees.
Christmas tree was a German original German tradition,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And so they have these little tiny trees put up. I guess there are a few lights, and the British can see these popping up randomly across on the German side, and the Germans, are singing Christmas carols. And there's one that's instantly recognizable, because Silent Night in German is Stille Nacht, and they hear the Germans singing, and so this is as good a sign as any, that maybe they're not all Huns and barbarians. Maybe these are people that can be talked to. And I think, during 1914, that's still an option. The war was dragging on longer than people had thought they would, and certainly longer than they wanted it to. But it was still new enough that people weren't entrenched, no pun intended there, in terms of their, hostile attitudes towards the enemy.
Yeah, as we talked about it in the last episode, I remember that saying, we're talking about how the Germans weren't necessarily not like the Nazis. They weren't obvious the bad guys. in World War One necessarily.
Well, according to British propaganda, they were,
Yeah,
and French propaganda. The Germans are Huns. The Germans are
yeah,
Huns.
but like now today we know they weren't like necessarily the bad guys. Not
Yeah,
like World War II, where it's easy to say that obviously
yeah,
easy to say that Nazis were definitely the bad guys, and it was a
yeah.
bit more complicated than World War II, to put it that way.
Or actually, World War II is less complicated. The
Mm.
Nazis are the bad guys.
Mm.
So yeah, World War I is a little more complicated. But I think it was possible to see them. It was possible to see the Germans as people. And and by accounts, the two sides were able to meet in various spots and
So
get along.
this didn't just happen in one place. This was just
No,
one
it
kind of thing.
happens. It happens up and down the Western Front through France and Belgium. There are at least a half a dozen spots where something like this happened.
So at this point, what was the German border like? Well, as we thought France, Belgium, but what in general, what was the German border like at this point in the war?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by the border.
Like, how far have they come? With the empire reach?
Oh, not very far. I mean, are they clearly in French and Belgian territory? Yes. But, it's not like they're within shouting distance of Paris. It is still clearly Eastern France.
So we thought, I want Victor to talk more, obviously, but how I want to ask us kind of an end question as well, but this never happened again. Why did this happen like in 1915, 1916 as well? And
Well, I think,
like an annual tradition to put it that way.
I think there are a couple of reasons for it. One is that the authorities on both sides, the military authorities, made it quite clear that this kind of fraternization was not permitted and that it would be prosecuted. They forcibly put an end to what happened in 1914. So, it's reasonably certain that they were going to be even more vigilant in 1915 and 1916 and after. I think the other point is what I alluded to earlier. After 4 months of fighting, or 4.5 months of fighting, it might have been possible to see the other side as human and maybe not all that different from you or I. But after close to a year and a half of fighting, it was much easier to see the enemy as something awful and evil. And so there was probably less desire to try to recreate that spirit than you had in 1914. I recently saw a reference to a 1915 truce that I just didn't have time to follow up on, to try to suggest that there was something similar in 1915, but that was the first time I'd ever seen anything about it. So I don't want to say nothing ever happened again, but it was certainly something that the military authorities on the British, French, and German sides were all well aware of. And you even had, in 1914, the British sending message saying, our commanding officer is coming and he's going to order us to fire, but we're going to shoot high. Don't worry about it. And the Saxon group on the other side said, we're cycling out after tomorrow and the Prussians are coming in. Go ahead and shoot them.
So did they play like board games, stuff and stuff? Did they? I also thought about they drawing together, but did they play like I'm going to refer a little bit to the commercial here, but like did they play games?
There's a record of them playing soccer. There's at least one soccer game in the record, and it's in one of the Bavarian military archives.
I actually found something here. There was someone that shared that we're going to try to find it again. A newspaper article on the Christmas truce of 1914. Let's see. Yeah, there's a photo here. I don't know if I can't show you through the phone, but there is like Christmas truce at front. Story told. I don't know if you read this article. I'm gonna try to zoom in on it so I can see if I can read it. Little bit of part of it, but it says a story told in letters from the trenches, Daily Mail, snowballs and joke with a foe. is one of the headlines of the article.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the article, but that's one of the references that Weintraub makes in his book are to letters back that, that refer to the truce.
How do we know what the soldiers thought about this? Like, as obviously, as we mentioned the letters, but like, what did they think about this when they realized that maybe we can have peace just at least tonight on Christmas?
I would imagine they had to have been pretty happy about that. These are people, Christmas means something, even for the people who aren't necessarily religious, it's a holiday that's firmly embedded in European culture. So, the idea of, and it's a holiday that's associated with family. So the fact that they're away from their family on the holiday, but at least they don't have to worry about being shot at or having to shoot other people, it had to, at the very least, have been a relief. I mean, nobody's going to be overjoyed at being in the front on Christmas.
Yeah.
But at the very least, it had to have been a relief.
Was there anyone who had a chance to get relief to go home on Christmas? Or was that not possible at all?
Oh, I don't know for certain. They would not have made special arrangements to allow people to go home for Christmas. It is quite possible that people's, time on the front had expired and they cycled back just in time for Christmas, or, maybe cycled back right after. But, certainly they're not going to make special arrangements for people to be home for Christmas, because where do you draw the line?
Yeah. That one, how did I generally get like alone? Or was it like, it's just for one day, we're not gonna really care about this?
It lasts a couple of days.
Really?
And at least in one spot, it lasts almost a week. But it lasts, the 25th and 26th in more than a few places. And that's one of the reasons why, it reaches the back lines and you have officers coming down and making sure people start fighting again. Because if you think about it from a soldier's point of view who doesn't know why they're there, they just know that they're there. Well, I don't have to fire at him for one day and he's not firing on me. The next day, he's not firing on me. I'm not going to fire on him. There was a, this is going to sound a little flipper than I mean it, but it's also serious. There's a danger of peace breaking out. And, neither government wanted that at that point.
So what do you think would have happened if that peace would have broken out because of the Christmas truce of 1914? What do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. And to be honest,
how would the world look like today, to put it that way?
Oh, goodness. I am in no position to answer that question beyond sort of spitballing ideas. That's an excellent question. I don't know. There's no reasonable way one could, imagine that the French and Belgians would let the Germans take the land that they already had. So any peace would have to go back to sort of the pre-war borders in the West. The East becomes a much more open question because...
Would we have called it a world war at that point, or would we just call it a European war, like the 30 Years' War or Napoleonic Wars?
It still would have been a world war. It would have been a shorter one. But remember, they didn't call it World War I at that time either. They just called it the Great War.
Yeah. Well, obviously didn't know there would be a second one. So yeah, mate. But I'm kind of similar question to previous question that I had, but was the morale kind of risen by this truce among the soldiers on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be at least a little bit of a morale boost. At the very least, you have peace for a couple of days. That's just not a bad thing.
I don't know about that. I'm kidding. But yeah, so I just trying to think of something here. So what were the generals?
Well,
Do we know how they felt about this? Like they
well,
higher.
they're the ones who put a stop to it. Here's a way to think about, what the peace meant. At, I am sure you have seen your fair share of World War I monuments.
Mm.
You can go to Verdun, you can go to any number of places to see, to see monuments to the people who were killed in the war. Do you realize there's not a single state approved monument for the Christmas truce?
I haven't thought about that. How so?
Well, there isn't one. There just isn't one. There is one place, and let me see if I can find the reference really quick. There is one place that was set up in Belgium by a group of Englishmen who called themselves the Khaki Chums, erected the only known memorial to the Christmas truce in Belgium, and locals have tended to it and preserved it. But there is no state monument for this, or state commemoration of the Christmas truce. I think that tells you something.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I don't know how much longer we can keep talking about this. But I don't have too many questions to ask, to be honest. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you. This been a shorter episode than normally.
That's okay. That's our Christmas present to everyone else. Will be shorter.
Exactly. And you're welcome back anytime you would like to come on. And before you go, do you have anything you wish to promote? Any social media you wish to share?
No, I'm terrible at self-promotion and remain terrible at self-promotion. For people, for scholars who are interested, I edit a journal called Environment, Space, Place, and we're always looking for good articles. So if you've got them, you can find the journal at the University of Minnesota Press, and you can reach me through them. Other than that, in a couple of days, it's Thanksgiving here in the United States. And then, the holiday seasons are coming up. So I wish you and yours.
This episode will, by the way, be out after Thanksgiving.
Yes, no, I know. But I wish everyone who's listening a peaceful and happy holiday.
Thank you very much for that. And this has been about that age 12. It's been a little bit shorter episode than normal today, but I hope that's okay. We are available on social media on Instagram under Well That Age 12, YouTube Well That Age 12, and we are available. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts. Please consider rating us on iTunes. Give us 5. We would appreciate a 5-star rating if you really like this podcast. You don't have to, of course, but it would be highly appreciated. My name is Anand. This has been Well That Age 12, and I'll see you next time.